right in. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to many of you who are here live with us on our Cultivating Voices live poetry. It's our Sunday new book showcase for the month of September, our September showcase. We're so looking forward to this reading tonight, featuring three poets who are undoubtedly going to be an incredible constellation of poetry for us this evening. Before I get started, just want to welcome you all. I'm your host, Sandy Yannone, author of Boats for Women from Salmon Poetry, and it is always my pleasure to be with you on the Sundays when we gather. And for some, it's Monday actually, but for me, it's Sunday here in Sunday afternoon in the Pacific Northwest of Olympia, Washington. And I'm just overjoyed and delighted to be able to welcome our three poets for today: Cáit O'Neill, McCullagh, Sinéad McClure, and there we go. And there is a little music to accompany my introduction today, kind of like that, courtesy of Michael Sims, our third reader today. If you were hoping to see Tayve niece today, unfortunately, Tayve is not able to join us today, and we're hoping to be able to feature Tayve at a future reading here on Cultivating Voices live poetry. And we just send our best wishes to Tayve with our thanks for agreeing to come to the new book showcase. And we're again looking forward to having Tayve return when she's available to read with us in a future new book showcase. But for today, we have, as I said, this incredible trio of poets, Cáit, Sinead, and Michael. A little bit about Cultivating Voices live poetry before we turn to the poetry for today. Well, Cultivating Voices live poetry began right at the beginning of the shutdown for the pandemic. Our first program was March 29th, 2020, and we came live on every Sunday for many Sundays in a row to allow poets to gather and share, commiserate, and process, and also make sure that there were venues for poetry. And it's been a remarkable journey these 3 years. So we're so excited that our fall season, our third fall season, is upon us, and that we've moved differently through the pandemic. One of the things is we've continued to grow immensely. We truly live up to our billing as an international poetry group. We have over 3,500 members that are participating on our Facebook page at different levels from literally all over the world. And when I was thinking today, I realized that in fact, we have probably had folks read from 6 of the 7 continents at one point or another on Cultivating Voices live poetry. So we are an international, intergenerational, intersectional poetry group. We aspire to be incredibly supportive and engaged with the poetry that arrives on our screens and at our doors. For our listening pleasure and edification. And, you know, I like to also think, I know this is true for me, I've met so many remarkable people, befriended people, networked with people, and it has just been a remarkable journey. So again, I'm always grateful for the audience members and all the poets. So thank you for coming today, but also thank you for your steadfast support throughout these many months, and look forward to many more. Well, let us turn to our poets for today for our new books showcase. As I said, we love the format of the new book showcase. It's so wonderful to be able to continue to support and hold a space in the different formats that we do, so that we can hear individual poems in a kaleidoscopic way in our wildcard open mics. And I especially love when we're able to bring the new book showcases, where we get to hear a more concentrated experience as we hear more from a person's body of work in this particular format. And as I said, today we've got three astounding poets, and we'll be hearing two of them through their work in collaboration with one another. I'll be introducing each individually, and we'll get to hear, as I said, a wonderful selection from their latest works. Well, first, I'll be introducing to you Sinéad McClure. Sinéad McClure's poetry and prose have appeared online, in print, and on the radio. And I have to say about Sinéad that the very first time I heard Sinéad, which I believe was through when it was not the time to be silent, now Lime Square Poets, I heard her sound and I said, that is a radio personality. That is a radio person. Oh, it's astounding. Well, Sinéad's most recent work can be found in The Stinging Fly, Ink, Sweat, and Tears, Live Encounters, Mark Ulysses, Fabulous Live Encounters, Step Away Magazine, The Ekphrastic Review, and on RTE Junior Radio. We love RTE. They're in Ireland, Northern Ireland, RTE Radio. Sinéad won the 2022 Cáit Poetry Competition and the Ovale 5-Word International Poetry Prize in 2021. And if you've not participated in Ovale, that is quite an accomplishment. She is the 2022 recipient of the Roscommon Chapbook Award, and her chapbook, The Word According to Crow, will be published in late autumn 2022. Her chapbook, The Songs I Sing Are Sisters, co-authored with Cáit McCullagh, is available right now, today, from Dreich Press. And we're, again, I love when we're able to feature these works in collaboration with each other, poets in collaboration with each other. So thank you, Sinéad and Cáit, for bringing this work to our stage today.
Thanks so much, Sandy and Kim and Don, for inviting myself and my sister poet Cáit to read for you today from our collaborative chapbook. As Sandy said, that's The Songs I Sing Are Sisters. It's been a beautiful journey in collaboration between us, starting when Cáit asked me if we'd like to collaborate on some poems, and this turned into a conversation between us. It's a meeting of minds, and we found so many connections, so many coincidences in our stories. We still do. But Cáit and I have yet to meet in real life. The stories and songs reflect on family, loss, mother and father, Mother Earth, togetherness. Some topics became a surprise. Other are the stories of migration many Irish families shared, for we all come from somewhere and we meet each other's passing by. So I'm going to read a few poems and then I'll pass over to Cáit, who'll read a few more. And if we have time, maybe we'll come back and read a couple more as well. And for this set of poems, I'm kind of going to concentrate on that theme of family and father, mother, and migration. My great-great-grandfather travelled through Ellis Island 4 times. The last time he never returned. And the family story goes that he was killed after being thrown out of a bar in New York. Whether that story is true or not, he did leave this earth as a relatively young man, a father of 4, one of which was my grandmother, Alice. But I found out some years ago that this man, James Lydon, was actually born in Australia, and his father came there some years after the famine from Ireland. Irish people have been moving around for many, many years, but the home place is never forgotten. Homecoming. My great-great-grandfather left Victoria at age 7. The outback faded to orange on the horizon. The wave gradient shifted from turquoise to navy blue. The wildness of Australia never lost its hue. My aunt left for Victoria aboard a 50s passage to a new world. Hugs faded from the platform, out of reach, marooned in her heart. My mother named distance a street of goodbyes. People were always leaving, always waving into empty spaces. When news came of my aunt's death, the gulf grew even larger, for there's no good way to travel there. My sister left London, a swaddled toddler held in the arms of the Irish Sea. We are children of the returned, who know to be devoid of homeland is to be forever lost. It's in the ripping out, the detachment. It's in the map of vacant eyes and darkened hearts. It's in the shape of our fada and the raven tumbling in from cirrus clouds. And it's westwards, and it's never coming home. On a similar topic, thank you. The next poem touches on ancestors too. I'll go and find it in the book. And when I said that James Lydon was born in Australia, his father, Michael, was born in Sligo. I didn't know that when I moved to this county. I didn't know that Michael followed the gold trail to an unknown land, and from 1860 to 1874, he lived in Keilor in Victoria, Australia, and he was an inn owner during the gold rush. This is where he met his wife, Hannah Evans, a strong Welsh woman, and they had 3 children. I didn't know that when Michael and his family returned, he came to live 10 miles from where I live now, in a place called Boyle in County Roscommon, where my mother was born many years later. So I moved to this place of rolling countryside, of the Kesh Caves, of the Carrickeel tombs, a rich historic place, not knowing, actually, I also belonged here. And that belonging runs very deep, I think, particularly with Irish people. I came here 25 years ago to this place of my ancestors, and it gives me a comfort. There's a familiarity in the landscape. There's something resolved within me. I actually don't feel properly at home until I cross the River Shannon, traveling westwards. And when my dad passed away, I heard him call out there in the darkness of that rolling landscape. But my dad didn't come from here at all. Rather, he followed me here. Lullaby. I hear wolves clamour from the past. They stand on Kesh Corran, pack tilted moonwards, hackles glowing beneath Jupiter. Is it just a distant howl of wind caught in the grey willows? I hear my father call out in his sleep long after he is gone. It's the neighbour's cattle lowing about, arguing over the best bit of field or the warmest spot in the coldest corner. Our ancestors walked the world from here. Their homes lie indented in the hollows. Ring forts richly decorate each perch and acre. I can hear their children laughing, soft breaths ghost-like as last year's Jonagold harvest. Kilty-Tayve, Kilnaharry and Kildargan Moor, forests without trees. The wolves grow closer, cries rounded by the breeze that licks at this hill. I fold myself into sleep. The wolves grow closer still. Thank you. An apparition of my father. I see his shape in the shadows, tiny pinpricks of light, static, trickling in the corner of my room. I want to go to him, pull that form around me like a cloak, but I just lay here and watch, weighted with the stillness, this faint contour, swinging like stars in the dark. I was born on the East Coast in Dublin, actually. And this is where my parents returned to. They met and married in London in England. And after which they honeymooned in Cultivating, which was my father's home place. And my mother fell in love with the sea and the landscape. And eventually she made him return home, and my eldest sister was a small child. In poetry, I often think of them both now as younger people, people I didn't know. And this poem I wrote for them, it's called Sunfish. They anchor at Dalkey Sound. Da's brown arms shake from the crossing. Earlier, he stirred basking sharks awake. Dark shapes circled the boat. Mam clutched the picnic, careful not to spill the wine. Her laugh rose wild as her ash blonde hair in this offshore breeze. Now, as they lie together, the silence is dull blue, a deep scratch on the sky, and the unwieldy beasts, those sunfish, resurface, water pilgrims at the island's edge. And the last poem I'm going to read for you in this set concerns another coincidence between Cáit and I that we found while we were doing the collaboration. This one was kind of a surprise, and I let Cáit fill you in because I think she's going to choose her poem on it as the first poem of her set. But it's a small poem which speaks about my father's romantic side, for he loved literature, but he was a working class man. For those who might know the geography of Ireland and think of Cultivating as one of Ireland's places of the rich and famous, aka Bono, etc., that wasn't my dad's Cultivating. My dad grew up in the lodge of a big house. That's where my grandmother cooked and cleaned, and my grandfather was head gardener and chauffeur. It was upstairs, downstairs. Maybe a little bit of the hoi polloi may have rubbed off on him, but I like to think, and I know, that he was just a very clever and well-read man for a welder. But he loved the Brontes, and he particularly liked Emily and her Wuthering Heights, and he was charmed by these dark tales. So much so that he said he'd call his children after the Bronte family children, in which case I am Anne. In another life, we were named after the Brontes. In this one, our father's romantic notions stalled after the first of us drew breath. He'd read enough not to christen sorrow, not to utter sepia words that come in rain and dark dog moorland. He knew Branwell had painted us all together, and then later erased himself, calling it clutter. I'm going to leave you now and hand you back over to Sandy and then Cáit for a little while, and I'm looking forward to hearing her read as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've been hearing the poetry from the collaboration. between Sinéad McClure and Cáit McCullagh, the new chapbook, The Songs I Sing Are Sisters. Well, let's turn to the second sister of this dynamic duo, Cáit McCullagh, and here's some of the poetry from her contribution to this just exquisite pairing. And I'm excited that we're going to get to hear a few possibly extra bonus poems from the two of you after. Well, a little bit more formally about Cáit. Cáit McCullagh is an ethnocologist who started writing poetry in December of 2020. So months into the deepness of the pandemic. Her poems are published in print, online, and in exhibitions, including in Northwards Now, Poets Republic, Poetry Scotland, The Storms, the great new journal that's just come out just in this past month or so. Dreich is the edge of all storms and not the time to be silent, collected works. She has won or been placed in various competitions in Scotland and in Ireland, including the joint winner of the Dreich Classic Chapbook for what we're featuring today, The Songs I Sing Are Sisters. Cáit's writing on Scottish culture appears in books alongside works by, among others, Andrew Motion, Irvin Welsh, and Kathleen Jamie. Currently, she's working on a new collaboration with the artist Rachel Ho and a collection invited by a publisher. Cáit is also in the midst of surviving cancer and has been kind of poignantly sharing that journey with those of us who are connected with her on Facebook, and continued healing and robust health through this process to you, my dear friend. And again, I also remember the very first time you came on to the Cultivating Voices live stage and shared with us. And it has been a marvel to have you be a member of this community. And again, so glad that you and Sinead joined together for this powerful work. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sandy and Kim and Dawn, for this generous welcome to share something of our journey and our poetry, the correspondence of friendship and words that Sinead and I found together during this uncanny time that we're still experiencing, and through which Cultivating Voices and Not the Time to Be Silent and Lime Square have been the loan that have really given the good ground for the generation of our work together. We've really been nurtured by your generosity in constantly welcoming and supporting poets and poetry. Thank you for that. Stormborn. Cold misted breath, I read each cutlass blade of grass. Great gilded gale glided gusts, billowed winnows of filsket fibre, set adrift hair razors, filaments flamed, fearted, ignited by the terror that such liberties could blaze their heath-riven hearts. I knew to know them then, kindrift, splayed branches, betrothed between trees, my people cleave to Brunty folk. I heft in uncan comfort to you, storm bandroe, Brontes, who birthed the sheet sweat wet that fevers every mind that craves freedom unchecked, to all spill primal passion and to be the pulse that pounds this world to love. So Sinead shared that in her last poem, that connection to the Brontes through her father's lyrical poet's mind. And when she shared that poem with me in what became a correspondence between us, a virtual correspondence, where we put up our poems on a drive online, and we would respond or comment. When I saw her poem, I Am Anne, I had to say to her, my goodness, I must respond to this. Wait till I tell you, Sinead, I'm related to the Brontes. And for those of you who know, the Brontes, or Patrick Bronte, the vicar who brought his 4 children to Haworth Parish, where they wrote in that incredible heady environment of the moorlands of Yorkshire, was actually an Irishman from Fermanagh, from the borders of Fermanagh in County Tyrone. And his Bronte folk are also my family's Bronte folk. But this was just one of many connections that we discovered, writing to each other in poems, as well as speaking in words on various Zoom calls, and meeting each other in the weekly sharing of poetry, be it in Lime Square or Cultivating Voices, or in those early days in the Not the Time to Be Silent meetings, and getting to know the cut of each other's jib. And kin, I think, became a common sensibility between us, that sensation that although, as far as we know, we're not related, although we are all part of the one human family, that sensation of having found an answer to a question we didn't even know we were asking. And we find that often as poets, in the words of other poets, that sensation that we are not alone in this world. And between us, we created a bridge across the wee sea between Scotland and Ireland. And that sense of kinship extended not just in our poems about each other and our families, but also a sensation that we were speaking the world at a time when it was the very connection between us as human beings, the connection to all life that was constrained in the pandemic lockdowns, that inability to express our very humanity. Because none of us want to be isolated, and no poet wants to be alone. Our very lifeblood is the life and livings of the people around us and the people who have touched us in our hearts, in our memory, in our minds. So we shared the sensation of kin, and often our poems reached back into that past that Sinead has talked about, that family heritage, and further into our sensation of being part of the one human family. Kin. We place palms to your futures, stretch sinuous span beneath the skin thin of time. These lips we gild with ochre, spit life to this rock, paint our breath to your eyes, and sing kin into the earth. We language land and sea, open-handed we speak them, right named, we warm the world womb. Capture the stars to light you to it. Listen, your song is spiraled in stone, in water, and in the underthought of words. Trace it in the carry of your life stream. The crease which folds your hand is the wound that remembers us, an opening to bind us to you, and we have poured all our wisdom there. So Sinead spoke about the theme of migration, which was very strong in the poetry between us. My parents also moved to London and stayed for longer than Sinead's. I was born in London and became part of that country to the east of Ireland and to the west and to the north and south, which is known as the diaspora. And that history of migration is rooted for my own family, who are from Kerry in the west of Ireland, in a series of marginalizations, movement of people from land that was fertile, fecund, to the more marginal lands of the West, a history of clearance and of great hungers. And this was the story that was told to me as a child of my own family heritage. And in some ways, the connection to which through which I understood my own parents' migration from an Ireland that was still living its post-colonial legacy in the 1950s. So this is a poem for my mother and for her people in Kerry. My mother, who we were never sure which day she was born on. She was born sometime around midnight between the 14th and the 15th of November. Naming. A place will know many names. The first is found in its becoming. It is made from the mouths it feeds, how they speak the very dark of gloaming, or the sky as she mourns the departed sun. They sing her name over mirrored pools where the moon gives her face to the stars. Other names are tight, coiled, sprung. We call them eviction and hunger. They ink the earth and map her fields, fence her unyielded to the woodbine. These names are arrow-tanged, barbed to tear and unskin lips. They take place and unseat wisdoms. A house can be full-lived and well-fed and yet never know itself a home. It is not the remembered house, not the one that loved your laughter, nor the haven that washed your feet in Skelligs and at Loch Curran, cool slaker of Lunas athirsts. There the Atlantic shared herself, gape-mouthed, salmon-wise, storm. She blew you into being, swam you through 2 moons, bore you like a fable, a flame flickered between 2 days and 2 names, one written, the other your own. Thank you. Migrant. I was precious, seed-carried nomad, secret in the folds of my parents' hopes. They sailed moons to blow me to this shore, where I found my feet and let them step me to your heart. The songs I sing are sisters to your stories of roots and soil, and they're older, made deep in time. Before this earth was measured into pockets of gold, songs unfurled from the people who walked it, feeling its seasons, moved them from ebb to ebb. They frayed its coasts, close chased the colours of shoals. I sing to spill yearning into these waves, to push myself hard to the wind's resistance. It returns me to you, to this hold-fast place, to the between house of becoming and belonging. Here to tie the grain knot around my migrant's heart. I hear your song. It is iron on stone. In the bog, it weeps your tethered dead. Root it there, bind it with place and time, with people and blood. I go to hear their whispers. They are memory and now. I go to ask for homecoming, to know that the dead want us to live. We place them upon swan's wings so that they might fly, and we put their ashes to the storm, then watched as they turned the sun for us. The bones you keep in stone, they are waymarkers only. Look again to the sky, and you will see the stars. This canopy of care will guide and shelter all. Thank you. So one of the pillars of the songs, and a pillar for all poets, is love. It was very much a sensation that Sinead and I shared, that there is so much love that has carried our journeys and the way in which our poems have been formed, our own formations, including, and not the least, those who have the patience to love poets. And so this is a poem I want to dedicate to all our beloveds, including Ivan and Joe and all of you who are here tonight, many of you who've shared this journey with us. This love. Oh, there are many kinds of love you might regret. The queasy softening of your spring queen knees as a boy or a robin tilts beak up and blush-chested to trill down into your nest-ready heart and steal it. The dead Spaniard eyes of a silver-crowned sparrow, love in the constant uncolour of cloud-covered sky, lead and ash its promise, fierce, unfaltered, faithful, calling, Curry here forever under steady eaves. You might never regret the love for you alone, goose gorgeous, down nested and mounded in, moss habit, lichen love that can only heal. You'll find it on the lee side of the sun. Large and all black mortal is a raven's love, a passerine one to sing life's end with. And what if this love is all that yearns between sky and earth? Regret it not. This love will call you home. Thank you. So I'm going to just read one more poem on this part of the set and before I hand back over to my sister poet, Sinead. And it's a poem, like many of our poems, a poem about family relations. And we wrote a lot about the mammies and the daddies together. Not all our poetry made it, of course, into the chapbook, and we keep saying to each other we have more work to do on this, but certainly in those stories of our families were stories of loss, and our living with loss, I suppose, was another reaching out to speak the world together in this time of pandemic. There has been a great deal of lived loss, felt loss, and we really wanted to express and share our being alongside, being with and for, not just ourselves together, but with all of the world in those experiences. And in the ways that our own lived experiences can open our heart, deepen our compassion, deepen our empathy. So this is a poem for my father. Moholas. You'll not find him here, he is not in these words. Once oak hard beneath the peat, like butter, he has slipped to softness. My father is not in this place. He has walked the map of his palm, followed the course of its life stream. Behind him, the river has thinned to tears. He travels a hollow way east. It is the road to the winter house, home to the rags and bones of human love. There he will hang up his life-heavy heart, discover the amber of deepest time, and in him it will become fire. Bright too are the fires we have set on the bog, 1,000 flames to light his turn to the west. And in the liquid sphere of this heather blaze, he will become again like a mountain. It is there you will find him, after these words, after this, my father, all light. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Koch. And I think we're going to turn back over to Sinead for.
Have we time? I don't want to be taking.
Yeah, oh, we have time. We have time.
Okay.
Absolutely. We all get a little bonus rounds from the three of you today. So
Oh,
beautiful.
I'm going to read just two more for this, and one that I love you, Koch, by the way. I love that beautiful reading. Just beautiful. This one is a hope of spring, but it's also hating to go into this time of the year over here, and we're getting into the darker evenings, as you can see. It's called Eilad Lorach. First, it is the sound of children laughing, then hoots, howls and bellows above the tree line. This is the whoop of spring's arrival. 40 arrow the sky, narrowly missing the tops of the Scots pine. Each day more swans leave, climb higher, fly faster. They are leaving the lakes, leaving Garra, Key and Gill. When a pair fly late, tell them hurry up, and they will, until the equinox casts shadows and they raise voices once more, fly towards a mid-September sunset. Finally, it's the sound of children crying. Thresholds by Cáit McCullagh. Tell us of thresholds as your mother told them. How when houses burned, they were saved, the doors, hungry, roofless, emptied, scoured but for this salvage heart wood kept to protect fresh hearts, make home. 14 let leave to live out from that ashy shade. You slipped, shod, followed a circus dreamer, Colleen Ashlingach, fleeing to Sneem, you, the road lifting your feet from Atlantic coral, dusting them in saffron, Monbrisha's scarlet fingers firing your flit to hope-held whirls, your heart, it fell, a weighted door, slammed and locked at the screeched brake of the Garda's bike, pushed out for you from Sneem, saddled with loss, dream-broken returnee, your trapeze wings clipped and folded, tear-dripped. Cry them, shut-eyed, drowning walls hefting you heart-sick, home-struck, keeping you parlored up, apron-stringed, until one usual day, again dulce-shod, berry-filled adrift, your feet fled the Whale Road, set fair, 20, unknowing then, that each leave you would take would fit the steps of all who crossed before. These thresholds, those many doors.
Thank you, Sinead. Are we still okay to do a little more? Is he okay? Love you too, Sinead. And this is a poem for all poets. Birth. To remind me that the sun will return, I paint ochre onto your body, this unruly loll of limbs and hair, and I chew the deer's hide soft, make a shroud of teeth and hooves for you, birthed but never born. Wings clipped at your moment of flight, I bury you among the mounds. They circle this turf like beads of coal. Your body I give to oil and quartz, to this necklace of jet and bog. Cradled upon the wing of a swan, stories swarm like beetles from your grave, carved between the care of earth and stars. Torn from a throat tarred with tears, they fall like arrows from a bow, and tell of swans and geese and hungry women who hunt. And each tale is like a fawn lost in the forest. In the quietening, we hear its pulse. People who will always be poets will search the whole world's ebb for your stories. They will tell how the fire ochre sun opened your wings and how you fanned its flames all about the earth. And final from us, I think, We Were Stones by Sinéad McClure. My mother collected stones. They lined her windowsill, all shapes and dialects, accents of other shores, held in every roll of tide that shaped them. They tumbled behind the mailboat, over the ashen sea and onwards to trains, platforms, rows of typing pools, to Trafalgar Square, where there were more pigeons than pebbles lost in the shale grey of smog that always took her breath away. Picnics at Parliament Hill Fields, swimming at the Lido, no rocks, just clear, cold water in fresh Italian blue, her body a fresco of calm, watercolor strokes. She never imagined the sea could be a lake until she saw it, the curve of beach, each stone and pebble glistening like a gem. Thank you, Tapalai.
Thank you so much. Cáit O'Neill, McCullagh, Sinead McClure. I have to say, I've been looking forward to the reading for so long. And I I was full of anticipation. I knew I would be moved, and yet I still was not prepared for how exquisite the reading and the weaving of the poems became as I sat here mesmerized and moved by the work, as you said, Koch, the between place between becoming and belonging. I just love how the two of you became to belong to one another in song as sisters. The chapbook, recently out from Dreich Press, is The Songs I Sing Are Sisters. I also can't help but feel that echo of the narrative threads that you're talking about, the family that and the migration, famine, hunger, and I hear those echoes of Ivan Boland as well in the work, and just an absolute moving experience for me, and I'm sure all of us here, and we're so grateful for the opportunity to be able to listen to your work tonight. Thank you. I'm just choked up by the whole experience, quite frankly. Well, we are always so fortunate here at Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, because we get to hear one exquisite poet after another, and also get to welcome folks who are, incredible contributors to the poetry citizenship that makes up the fabric of what all of us in this room aspire to do. And I think an incredible model of that is our next poet, Michael Sims. So I'm incredibly honored to be able to share this information with you about our next poet, Michael Sims. Well, Michael Sims has worked as a squire to a Hungarian fencing master, a stable hand, a gardener, a forager, an estate agent, a college teacher, an editor, a publisher, a technical writer, and a literary impresario. I might add giant. I'm going to add giant. Michael identifies as being on the spectrum and a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, who didn't speak until he was 5 years old. And we are grateful for your voice in those years since when you began to speak. He is the founding editor of Autumn House Press and Vox Populi. In 2011, he was recognized by the Pennsylvania Senate for his contribution to the arts, and his most recent books include 2 poetry collections, American Ash and Nightjar, and a novel, Bicycles of the Gods, a divine comedy. It is truly my honor and pleasure and great joy to be able to hear your voice today, impresario Michael Sims.
Thank you, Shannon, and also Kim and Don for inviting me to be part of this wonderful showcase. I feel very honored to be here. I'm going to read brand new poems, which I've written just over the last couple of months, including one which I just finished a few days ago. These poems have been inspired by 2 gardens I've known and worked in. Both the garden behind my current home in Pittsburgh, where my wife and I have built a garden, and also the garden behind the home in Houston, Texas, where I grew up. This first poem is called Persimmon. And the persimmon described here is the Diospyros tejana, a species indigenous to Texas and northern Mexico, which produces a small black fruit similar to a plum. It's very different than the different species than the persimmon that you buy in grocery stores elsewhere. These usually grow wild, but we had one in our backyard. I was raised in a house in Houston with a large garden where I was expected to work every day. I didn't mind because in the house there was always shouting and hitting, while outside I could enjoy the peaceful song of cicada and chickadee, the beauty of azalea, flowering pear, the scent of sage, laurel, and the taste of fig, pecan, persimmon. For me, autism was a gift of silence and solitude. As Shannon said, I didn't speak until the age of 5, and then only with a heavy speech impediment. So I did to the natural world. Persimmon. Nothing changed the first year, although I felt the white net of mycelia spreading around the roots and the leaves learning to move through sunlight and shadow the way I was learning to move easily through the seasons because I couldn't speak. Each October, the leaves fell, joining the layer of humus. The wet leaves froze in the fall, decayed in the spring, fed the new leaves in March, and all summer crickets sang, and also robins, and in high pines a crow called. In the third year, I saw a spoonbill fly overhead, forming words out of air, but no one listened. The sapling spread until it filled a corner of the yard, and we had to move the tomato patch to the sunlight, and later the garlic and parsley. I was supposed to be baptized, but refused, believing only the dark and light of the garden. Each year, Diospyros filled out, growing lush and tall. In the 6th year, flowers appeared, then green fruit which yellowed. We spat the astringent flesh and placed the basket of fruit in the cellar to ripen. After a week, the persimmons, hard, crisp, and sour as crab apples, darkened, sweet as peaches, dusky as plums, and we ate them greedily. All but one I left on the windowsill, an experiment in sunlight. The last persimmon was soft, a small black sack I bit open, and my mute tongue welcomed dark honey. This next poem is called Hatred. It takes place in our back garden, where my wife and I live. And we both work very hard in the garden, and we're proud of it. At one point, this nasty vine started growing. It's full of thorns, and it was a bramble, and it sort of took over the garden at times. I was always chopping it back, and I really hated it. And eventually I found out it was a blackberry bramble. And so we found a place for it. This is a poem called Hatred. Out of spilled coffee grounds and banana slime beside the compost bin, a gangly vine grew, twisting out of shadow into slats of light between the boards of the deck above. I hated the way tough thorns of rubus drew blood whenever I passed, the way a suckering root held clay and stone in 1,000 fingers, never letting go, choking the softer roots of elderberry and cherry. stealing water from roses and sweet shrub and milkweed that fed the monarch. This bramble, this briar patch of demon weed was killing my garden. So I investigated poisons. Triclopyr kills dicots, leaving grasses alone, but would kill the roses and azaleas as well, maybe me. But still I was crazed with hatred for this weed. I scythed, mowed, axed, hoed, trimmed, yanked, and eyed with vicious intent this intruder eating my garden. But the satanic bramble would not die. Then, in the spring of the 4th year of my war, the arching canes ventured small white blossoms whose yellow stamens attracted bees. And in midsummer green berries turned red, then black, and a tanager perched on the compost bin, feasted on the dark drupes. The berries tasted sweet, the hard seeds insistent on my tongue. I resisted pleasure, then succumbed. This next poem is called The Garden, and it's based on the garden in our backyard, but it's a science fiction poem. It projects into the future, into the collapse of our civilization, which we all can see around us at this moment. And so it's a projection into the future, the garden in the future. The garden. Our iPhones told us of fires in the West, floods in the South. The great cities of the North and East were erupting. Chaos reigned everywhere but here. Our neighbors stopped by with gifts of strawberries in the spring, tomatoes in the summer, squash in the autumn. And we in turn allowed our neighbors to gather the fans of dark fruit from the grandmother elderberry in our backyard and the stubborn blackberry at the edge of our property, long believed a weed, volunteered its abundance to all. The first year, our dog grew lean and happy, hunting rabbits, squirrels, and deer. The empty lots became wild fields, surrendering a bounty of dandelion, purslane, and burdock. We threw away our iPhones and rummaged books for old remedies. In the night sky, stars appeared, and constellations long forgotten were known again. A blimp, trailing the rags of an unreadable banner, disappeared over the horizon, and then nothing in the sky but the godly sun looking down. And when the first generation was old, we learned to praise, and only then ugliness left our lives. We gave thanks at the evening meal, slept the sleep of the just, and woke to the sound of larks. Crows in the high trees also spoke to us. The flute, abandoned in the attic for years, was lifted into song. In the evening beside the fire, we told stories of flying machines and moving pictures. The rusting hulls of automobiles were stripped of metal for tools, and tires were shredded to make shoes. And in the second generation, after we'd learned the language of crows, the trees began to speak, and we, the people of the garden, began at last to listen. This next piece is a love poem. Do I have a few more minutes? Yeah. This next piece is a love poem. It's called Trust. Trust. I want to hear about the time you were hurt and the many years you couldn't trust yourself. I want you to trust me as earth trusts the rain and the season welcomes our hands in the dirt. When the new shoot lifts its head, soil still clinging to its chin, the root has barely started its journey. unsure of its way through the dark, what is hidden, what is revealed. When I walked into the room, you were reading so deeply, I tried not to watch you. Outside, it was gently raining. When we were young, our love was a storm, shaking the trees. The neighbors shook their heads in disapproval. Now we are old. Our love is the moon, tangled in the limbs of the pecan tree, and the neighbors barely notice. Tell me when the pecans begin to fall, and I will meet you beneath the boughs, search in the fallen leaves for the dark fists of memory, where laughter carried us through the long evening. When you see me becoming smoke and ash, it is the beginning. I will wait for you on the path. Just a short 3-line poem here called Flight. Like a fledgling on a ledge, you will discover your wings only if you let yourself fall. And I think this will be my last poem. It's called Rosamund and the Rain. My grandmother, Rosamund DeLee Sims, was, not to put too fine a point on it, crazy as a loon. She was manic depressive, bipolar. When she was down, she was very, very down. And when she was up, she was wonderful, funny and charming and brilliant. And she played the piano when she was on the height of her cycle. And she would improvise. And beautiful thing. She had only a brief lesson when she was a child, but had always been around a piano and had just taught herself to play. And she just make up things as she was sitting there. One time, she was so good that one time a neighbor of ours heard her music coming through the open window, and he later said, "Oh, your grandmother plays Chopin so well." It was her, it wasn't Chopin, but it was like Chopin. It was light and lyrical and brilliant leaps. So here's a poem called Rosamund and the Rain. The rain knows more about us than you think, how it finds the smallest spaces between your neck and your collar, your love and your fear. My brother and my sister, one who refuses to speak to me and one who can't speak, having passed at her own hand years ago. Every rain recalls every rain. Sitting at the window as a child, seeing the trees fill with wind, pulling at their roots, feeling the rain fill the spaces in the soil, quenching the long memories. My grandmother in her mania, inventing riffs on the piano in the next room. The first time I heard Chopin years later, I realized she'd been improvising on memories of her childhood. Our bodies have absorbed the music of the rain, and now someone is calling me from far away, and I know her voice, how like the rain it is. So thank you very much.
Everyone, you've been listening to Literary Impresario. I just like saying the word impresario. Michael Sims, for whom I give you the moon. I give you the moon, my dear Michael. That reading. I resisted pleasure, then succumbed. You all remember that line. And what a thing it was to succumb to the poetry of Michael Sims today. The newest collections are American Ash and Nightjar. And I have to add also that I too do battle with the blackberry bramble in my backyard. And in so much so, in fact, that this weekend I was down I was down visiting some friends on the coast here. And I'm wearing some shorts, and my friend is like, what the heck happened to your legs? And I was like, it's the blackberries.
Oh.
It's the blackberries. And I'm gonna go do battle with them again just after the reading today to go pick some more. So I want to also just, the poignancy of the connection between the power of your observation and the desire to encourage us to listen, to listen, to listen. That is the power of poetry. And that is what encourages us to speak those truths. What an absolute incredible reading from Michael Sims. And of course, we began our hour with the songs I Sing Our Sisters from Sinéad McClure and Cáit McCullagh. How about we unmute and show our absolute appreciation for this beautiful trio of poets that we
Here,
are.
here, fabulous,
Bravo,
fabulous.
bravo.
Whoop, 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 whoop. It was amazing.
What a reading.
Thank you.
What?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What a reading.
Beautiful.
From all time zones, my friends, from all time zones,
There you go.
listening to you all tonight. And we are all the better for the fact that we were able to hear tonight from Sinéad McClure, Cáit McCullagh, and Michael Sims here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry's New Books Showcase, our September New Book Showcase, with great appreciation, of course, to Kim Ports Parsons, Don Krieger for arranging and holding this space for us to be able to listen to this trio. And of course, a few of you had maybe expected to hear Tayve Nice, and we promise that we'll bring Tayve back for an incredible reading. And maybe we'll bring Michael back to join in that reading with Tayve. I know the two of you really had looked forward to reading together, and boy, we would blow the roof off the computers to hear the two of you in conversation with each other. So much. I love the idea of conversation and poetry. It's reminding me also of so many poets that have written in that back and forth. And one book that comes to mind is William Stafford and Marvin Bell's Segues, a Conversation in Poetry. And if you've never experienced that book, you might take a peek at that one and look that one up. But so Sinead and Cáit have really tapped into what I hope will continue to evolve more and more as something that poets do, that drive not to be in isolation, and then to not write in isolation, to write in conversation. I love it. Well, what a conversation we've had today here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. I mean, Kim, I see you sitting there, you're shaking your head, I'm shaking my head. I'm like, I've been crying, I've been laughing, I've been sighing, I've been guffawing, I've had the whole gamut of emotion. And isn't really that what poetry is about? Is really tapping into that gamut of our emotions, those that we know are there on the surface, and those that we did not know were yearning to be free. And poetry brings those forth. Poetry brings those forth. Well, I hope that many of you will come forth next week when we will be hosting our September wild card open mic. As I always like to say, you are the features. You are the features. A reminder that if you would like to read in the open mic, signups are begin 15 minutes before the top of the hour, depending on your time zone. That's why I always say top of the hour, because for me it's noon Pacific, but for all of you, it's in different time zones. So at the top of the hour, 15 minutes before the top of the hour, they've been filling up rather quickly within minutes. So please do arrive early. If you are eager to sign up. We usually will take about 12 to 15 poets, and I do try to get to that wait list and try to curb my tongue a little bit so I can get as many poets in as possible. Well, it's very hard for me to not continue the accolades for today's reading. So again, a final thanks again to Sinéad McClure, Cáit McCullagh. The new chapbook is The Songs I Sing Our Sisters from Dreich Press, as well as Michael Sims, and whose latest collections are American Ash and Nightjar. Folks, we have in the chat here, for those of you here live with us in Zoom, we've got the links to their books. And of course, tomorrow we'll be posting those onto our Cultivating Voices live poetry Facebook page. For those of you who've been watching through Facebook today or watching this on the recording, I do hope that you all will, to the best of your ability, and if resources are possible, invest in poetry. Purchase one or both or three or all of their works. All of the works. And again, I hope you'll all join me, Sandy Yannone, your humble host here at Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. I hope you'll join me, Kim, and Don next week for our wild card open mic. Until then, my friends, as I always say, take very good care of yourselves, take exquisite care of your beloveds, and keep writing so that we can keep listening to your remarkable poetry. I look forward to seeing you next time. Be well.